Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're talking about The Bad Batch, Episode 3, along with Sarah Hayashi, a regular guest on the Star Wars Universe Podcast, and Scotty St. Clair of the Animation Deliberation Podcast. All that and more after a commercial break. We have no control over it. Welcome back. I'm Matthew, your host. I'm joined today by a couple of awesome people. First of all, Scotty St. Clair. Scotty, as well as his co-host, will be joining us every week because we're teaming up for this podcast with the folks from the Animation Deliberation Podcast. Scotty, so glad we could have you with us.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. Excited to do our first live coverage of this awesome series.
Definitely. Yeah, for those listening at home, we are also live streaming this on Twitch. We'll hopefully be doing that every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Central. Obviously, that time can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So that way, if you want to throw in questions, give feedback, stuff like that, we'll be right here for it. Also joining us is Sarah Hayashi. Sarah's been a regular guest with us with the Clone Wars, and so especially given that this is a direct growth out of that, really excited to have you with us too. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So let me just start with kind of general thoughts. What do you guys think of this episode?
Well, for me, coming off of the last episode, I voiced some criticisms, even though I did enjoy it. This was much more a return to form to me in a lot of ways. I really like the tone, I like the action, and I like the character development and the reintroduction of a certain character. I feel anytime he's involved, the show is just that much better for it. So I'm coming really high off this episode.
I think we can give a full spoiler warning that we're assuming you've seen The Bad Batch Episode 3. So, Scotty, who's that character?
Well, I think everybody knows Crosshair. So we didn't see him last episode, but he got some really, really effective scenes here and some really moving stuff. And I'm super excited to see where they go with the character.
Yeah, me too. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I liked it as well. I've liked all the episodes. I'm pretty easy to please, I think, when it comes to the show. But yeah, I liked how we had the A story and B story. I think that was interesting, and really getting to see the development of the Stormtrooper army moving away from being the clone army, and had like Crosshair's involvement in that, as well as like from the, I guess, A line. I don't know which you'd call which, but the rest of the Bad Batch sort of mourning and missing Crosshair as well.
Yeah.
And then this idea of like, can he be redeemed? Is this all his fault?
Yeah.
That sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think we had some discussion last episode of wondering, like, is he just going to become an antagonist, or will there be the we're going back for him storyline? And I was really glad to see that. It seems pretty clear we're going back for him. And that there is this, because to me, that's such a beautiful tension that they established somewhat already in the Clone Wars Season 7 of, what do you do when you're all brothers, when you've all been fighting together all this time, and now some of you are fighting against you, but for reasons that are kind of out of your control, because it's mind control or the chip or whatever. And I think there's just there's a lot of really beautiful storytelling to explore there about what, like, he's their brother, they love him, they miss him, but also now he's trying to kill them, and how do you balance that?
Yeah, or not trying to kill them specifically. Well, I guess he did, but it started with this like trying to kill their friends, and they didn't understand why. Yeah, and then I think there is this maybe element of like, well, are we disobeying orders, and that's why he's after us? And then it does seem to boil down to this, like, they figured out it's the chips somehow, but still need to dig in more to that.
Right. What did you guys think of? Because he got a good storyline himself, with him being kind of the leader of this new batch of the elite soldiers, and proving that, we had an elite soldier who was like, killing civilians, that's not what we signed up for. And Crosshair, killed the guy and then ordered the killing of the civilians. What was your kind of take on where his character went there?
As dark as it was, I loved everything about that side of the story. Getting introduced to, the civilian introduction, civilian stormtroopers in the Empire, that's something like a fan like me knows nothing about. So the time that we got to spend with the character of like Admiral Rampart and seeing what that's actually doing to the Kaminoans and how they're actually stressing and what they're going to do in response to that. I mean, in addition to all that, seeing those civilian soldiers butt heads with someone like Crosshair, who he's used to enjoying the company of people that are just like him in more ways than not. And just to see how ruthless and effective he is, and how that's going to change the tone of how the Empire treats civilians and just how the Empire is viewed. I love all of that stuff.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, and when the I don't even know if we got names for the stormtroopers, but the blonde guy who was mouthy and like telling Crosshairs that he's gonna take over from him.
Right.
Like when they were in that transport and he was kind of mouthing off, I was like, Ricky and I were joking that like, oh no, there was an accident and this guy accidentally got shot. But like Crosshair seemed to find a more effective way of getting rid of this guy. At least a more legitimate way, maybe. But yeah, and I like that we got the repetition of good soldiers follow orders.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to me, there was kind of two related storylines that we saw, and I want to talk about the larger story one with the switch to the stormtroopers. But just with Crosshair for a second, I thought this was really interesting, both for who his character is, but also because I felt like, and tell me if you guys read it differently, I felt like we were really learning a lot more about what Order 66 actually means. Because up until now, all we really known was that it meant you have to kill all the Jedi. And that you can't question it, you can't do anything about it, you have to kill the Jedi. And that, as you said, Sarah, and as Crosshair said, good soldiers follow orders.
Right.
As I've understood it, like, we've had in the past, in the Clone Wars, situations where generals gave orders that the clones thought were terrible, and they clearly questioned them. And in a few instances, like, directly went against those orders or disobeyed those orders. So we know that clones could do that before now. To me, I felt like they were really expanding what Order 66 meant, because here, Crosshair is being given an order that he is kind of like the obey orders type up until now. But, you know, what we saw of him in the Clone Wars Season 7 didn't strike me as the guy who would happily shoot civilians without any question. And so, I took this as, especially because he repeats that kind of brainwashy phrase, good soldiers follow orders, that this was that Order 66 actually is a lot broader. And Order 66 really is like, we're going to cut off independent discernment and thought about your orders. You're now just going into utter and total compliance about the Jedi or pretty much anything else that the Emperor orders. Is that kind of how you took it, or did you see that scene differently?
Yeah, that's what I thought. So I actually, Riki, my husband, who's been the co-host for our Clone Wars episodes, and I watched this together this morning, and he's at work right now. Blah. But we were chatting about it, and he got a different take. He thought it was more like John Walker from Falcon and Winter Soldier, just sort of going rogue, being angry. And I was like, no, he's like Winter Soldier from Winter Soldier, where he's being brainwashed, right? And that Order 66 is this ultimate compliance. We got to see a scene where his inhibitor chip was like tweaked to make him, I guess, even more compliant by the Kaminoans. So yeah, I do think Order 66 is this ultimate compliance order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for pointing out that he has had his Order 66 chip kind of like improved. And I don't know if that's because it was kind of damaged and they brought it back up to normal, but I think they definitely expanded it. So you're right, it might be that some of the other clones would have like, don't think we're supposed to do that, but definitely not him.
I know this isn't the exact time for rampant speculation, but the fact that we did see Crosshair return to that, you know, that it looks like a CAT scan to me, but whatever's, you know, improving his inhibitor chip, it did give me concern when Wrecker's head started to hurt from just a seeming knock on the head, and it made me think, you know, some of the things I brought up on the first episode's coverage about maybe Wrecker will be influenced by this inhibitor chip, and hopefully whatever tech is developing there in terms of combating that will come to fruition sooner rather than later, I'm hoping.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a real possibility.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. Like, I thought for sure when he was like, my head, you didn't hit your head, this is your inhibitor chip malfunctioning. And also someone should stay with you because at the very least you have a concussion and like someone needs to keep an eye on you. But
you know, I have to say, for all the things that the Bad Batch is doing well, their decisions about maintaining the safety and care for the other members. I am not a parent, but I have been a Sunday school teacher, and I've done other things like leading groups for children. And I think I've sometimes used the language of, you know what, we all need to work together, we're all a team. That being said, if some massive danger occurred, and I felt like, you know, there was like a shooter in the building or something, and I felt I had to go deal with something, And one of the little 10-year-olds under my care had said, no, I have to come with you. I'm on your team. I'm not taking them with me. And I want to know what you all think. I loved what Hunter did there, but I was also like, no, she's 10. Paul Hoppy pointed out in a Facebook comment, she doesn't have armor. She doesn't have weapons. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, she didn't know what dirt was until like a day ago. Like, yeah, this is not the person you're bringing with you. This is the, like, you stay and make sure Wrecker doesn't have a concussion.
Right? That might be a good pairing of resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't argue with any of that, but just in terms of the story, it was nice to give Omega another opportunity to step up to the plate, and where there was an opportunity where violence could have been used, as the Bad Batch has so often done, relied on violent methods. It was nice to see her have that moment with the Ordo Moon Dragon, and there was actually a moment of beauty there, seeing it like light up, and her being able to accomplish that in such a manner. I really like that through line there.
Yeah, like, I mean, whatever choice it took to get her out in the field, I thought it did turn into a brilliant moment. Mm. Especially because it's kind of a trope, but I think a really good one, of one fairly naive person joins the sort of very battle-hardened, very cynical, very jaded people. And for the most part, that person, like, doesn't know the things that everybody else knows. But sometimes you get a moment where, like, they also haven't learned to always think, as you said, like, the fighting is the right... is necessary. They haven't learned that you always have to battle every monster.
Right.
And yeah, I like that. I thought that was a nice, like, what can Omega show them, as well as what they can teach her.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that she didn't sneak off again as well.
Yeah.
Because I think, like, that maybe sets up a bit of a dangerous precedent,
Mm-hmm.
and we get her pushing into kind of Anakin territory
Ooh.
of, like, well, I've never followed orders and it's always worked for me before. So the fact that, like, Hunter willingly brought her along, even though, 100% bad parenting call. I mean, like, Hunter's not a parent. Hunter, like, doesn't know what he's doing, which is what, like, when Sue and, Cut. Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. Like, when they were like, you should take Omega, please and thank you.
Yeah,
like, right. I thought that was a good call. Because, like, you know these folks.
Yeah.
They're good parents, right? And then her coming back to Hunter and the rest of the batch, like, yeah, that's not right. That's not what's right for this kid, but also we wouldn't have much of a story if she just went and hung out with a happy family.
Right. So let me ask you, this is kind of a side thing, but I'm curious, and we got an email about this, actually.
Oh, good.
Omega versus Omega. What? Because, like, you know, I've said Omega, you said Omega, which makes sense, because, like, the name... She calls herself Omega. Everyone else calls her Omega.
She calls it... go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think she calls herself Omega because she's got her New Zealand accent, and that's just how you say Omega in that accent.
Right.
Well, but everyone else is still calling her by the other name, by Omega. And I'm wondering, do you think this is just, like, is there a plot point here of that she's not quite, like, she's shy and so doesn't want to actually correct people on her name? Or is this kind of a New Hope moment where Peter Cushing seemed to think that the character was Princess Leia and no one wanted to correct the famous actor, and so they just had it on screen as people calling her different names?
Well, I think it's just, like, different names sound different in different accents.
Yeah, that's what I'm willing to kind of lean into there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, like, my name sounds real weird in Japanese, but I understand that that's still my name, and that's just, like, how it sounds with that accent.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see that.
But yeah, we could get, like, a data moment from her later. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll definitely be curious to see where it goes. I will say that, this is kind of backing up to what we thought of the overall story, but it's very much on this. I've had kind of a 180 about that storyline. Because at first, I felt like there was so many interesting plot things we were developing that what felt kind of like a Monster of the Week story, I was like, okay, I don't really want Monster of the Week stuff. And, you know, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations on other podcasts about how there's something really great about the 6-episode, the 8-episode shows, and then often when you get, like, 12 episodes, let alone 24, there's a lot of filler.
Sure.
And at first I was like, does this mean that maybe 16 is going to be too much and that we're going to get a lot of, like, Monster of the Week filler type stuff? And I think I still have that concern. But I think the more I thought about it, the more I felt like it was kind of helpful to have something that was more like day in the life, because it helps to make us feel like this episode is, like, this storyline is slowly unfolding, and we have a balance of, like, Monster of the Week versus the plot. which kind of makes more sense in this world because it's not all happening at once. What did you all think? Were any of you at all bothered by the Monster of the Weakness? Do you all just love it? What's your kind of take on it?
It's not impacting me negatively yet. Like I said, getting the story beats that we got with Crosshair, in addition to Omega getting the moments that she got. It's not. I don't feel like we're running in circles, or none of it has felt like filler yet to me. It's all been compelling storytelling. So as long as they continue to do that, I'm on board. So.
Yeah, it may be me being just super jaded that I'm already like, there's one monster of the week. It means there's filler. Oh no. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say I agree. Like if we do get more, if it was just Monster of the Week, then I think it'd be a little and I didn't like that storyline as much as the Crosshair storyline, but I'm glad that it was paired with the Crosshair storyline.
Agreed.
So it wasn't just like, a filler episode, Matthew.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think especially the fact that even though they're the Bad Batch, that felt kind of like the B plot or the C plot.
Sure.
I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Jumping back a bit, as I said, kind of the Crosshair thing was one. I now just want to go back to what you all brought up before about that we also now get this larger story of how the Empire is moving to stormtroopers, and I think we're all agreed that was a really wonderful storyline. I love that it's even mentioned as I think either Tarkin or Rampart, I forget which one, but says that the clones are a cost-prohibitive relic of the past.
That was Tarkin for sure.
It was Tarkin. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it is a very his kind of language, and I just love that because I love that it's. We've talked about all these reasons why the Empire might want to not use clones, and I think all of them are also very true. But the fact that it's also cost prohibitive. Like, we're now getting into, this is a galactic empire ruled for power for the Sith. But it's also an empire, and there's bureaucracy, and there's costs, and there's administration, and it just made my bureaucratic loving heart just so happy to hear that.
Well, you even got that moment with the volunteer soldiers where the blonde guy mentioned, like, I have a roof over my head, I'm fed for the first time. Like, that never happened under the Republic. And I just love any of those opportunities that you get that nuance, that you get to see that the Empire is not as evil as it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Empire has done absolutely heinous things, but it's always nice to just get a little bit more clarity into why regular people would buy into this, and that there is some stability and there is some value to the Empire, for lack of a better way of expressing myself.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're a little bit further removed from like the politics and like the lightning hands of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're just a regular person, right? You see going from this endless war to like, okay, war's finished now.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we have money now. Like, oh, I can get a job and a roof, right? Like it's there are benefits to it, even though, they're evil.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that has been very much borne out in our own world, that like in times of great chaos, whether it's economic or especially after like long warfare or unrest or things like that, people will feel that like a strong authoritative figure who can just to make the trains run on time, that there's value to that. And I'm not defending that at all, but I also understand where it comes from. I think we see it like and even like the idea of like the person who wants to become that authoritative figure manufacturing the chaos, like that also has real world, it's funny how much the stuff that when I watched when I was 14 or 15, I was like, come on, that's not, this is a fun fantasy, but that's not real. It's like, nope, this stuff happens. And yeah, it is nice, I think you're right, J. Scotty, to see, and both of you, that, because I think often, like, when it's, our loyal band of rebels, you get the sense that every person around the Empire is just like, I hate the Emperor, but they're going to, like whiny Luke says in the beginning of his first movie, what can I do? They're the Empire. They have the Death Star. And seeing that, no, there are probably some people who are like, at least now we don't have Jedi running around telling us what to do and what we can smoke and, all this kind of stuff. And now we don't have we have actual law and order, which is, for us, if we want it good. I say all these horrible things, but yeah, I think it's so great seeing why normal people would be okay with what's happening.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, like Luke's plan was to go join the Academy, right? Like that's the Empire. And then go buy some power converters from Toshi Station and stuff. But like, yeah, it's, I think once you get a little bit away from it, you don't see how truly evil it is, unless you're like actually examining it, right? Whereas if you're just living your day-to-day life and not really paying that much attention to this galactic government, and especially being on like one of the outer planets, I feel like Republic or Empire, like there's a line from Last Jedi where it's like Republic, Empire, it's all the same. Right. Like, I'm gonna sell weapons to both sides.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Like, once you get far enough removed from it, as long as there's some sort of government that seems to be working, does it really matter all that much to you if you're not, like, does it affect how you run your farm day to day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Mandalorian, I think, is doing a great job of showing that as well, because that's at the other end when the New Republic has taken back over, but they haven't established law, they haven't established all these kind of things, and so yeah, it's nice seeing that theme kind of return to here.
Yeah. Agreed.
I also I really liked the small point they made about the difference between volunteers versus conscripts, especially because we do know, certainly by the time of The Force Awakens, but I imagine long before that they are a mostly conscript army. So I think that's going to be an interesting tension to see. And I'm curious, again, mass speculation here, how you think this will play out. It feels like this episode, though, once Tarkin realizes what actually happens, maybe he doesn't, would be a very big argument for the clones. Because part of what we've seen here is that the clones are much more controllable. The fact that the soldiers didn't want to do the thing. What's your kind of take on that? Do you think that will be kind of a, like, maybe Tarkin is more leaning towards the clones because of that? Or how do you think that'll play out?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm a little confused as to why they're not using the existent clones. Because, like, clearly they still have clones. I get the money reason for not making more. Especially since, like, one of the Kaminoans said their original DNA material from Jango Fett is degrading.
Right.
So, like, I get why you wouldn't want to make more of them. But you theoretically have a whole bunch of clones right now. Why not just keep using them? And, like, yeah, this idea of turning them into sort of the trainers for your army. And maybe you just need a really, 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 really big army.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I like what Rampart said about... like, you can get even more loyalty from people who sort of willingly sign up versus these clones who you make to do this job. I also think it might be interesting to see if we try and get some inhibitor chips put into these volunteers.
Ooh.
Because, like, I don't think there's anything specific about the clones that make them receptive to the inhibitor chip, right?
That's really possible. I think there's always a danger, I feel like, with prequel stories, that once you introduce something, you then have to ask, why is it no longer present later? And I feel like if they introduce an inhibitor chip, they also then have to explain why Finn doesn't have one. Granted, that's 40 years later, but still, like, once the Empire has that technology, you wonder why it doesn't. But yeah, I think it could be a very interesting thing for them to play with.
Because he's just a janitor. There we go. Bam.
Yeah, I that would be super, super fascinating. I mean, I guess just in terms of speculation, the only thing I could think as far as that goes is maybe the first wave of volunteer soldiers, they do introduce this inhibitor chip to, and it's just kind of that facade of, showing a capable fighting force, because whatever kind of continuity you want to have, you have to explain somehow how the stormtroopers become as terrible as they do. Right. In the original trilogy, right?
Yeah.
With the clones training them, they're going to be just like, okay, so the plan here is just fire wildly, but first you have to announce where you're going to be and yell, get him, then start firing. That's how it works. As like sort of a way of making them terrible because they still have this like goodness in them. But yeah, then Crosshairs kind of botched that plan for me.
I feel like it's going to be a hard thing because on the one hand, it's hard to imagine Star Wars acknowledging like a problem of the earlier movies, like namely the stormtroopers, who Obi-Wan says are that like no one has that accuracy except stormtroopers. I do though feel like that in Mandalorian they kind of lampshaded a bit, like that when they're both shooting at like a rock on the ground and they keep missing it.
Right, that's fair.
This would be a very deep cut. I don't know if they're going to do this, but the explanation I could kind of imagine of it is that like, when you think about like the way authority uses violence to keep people in line, if you actually have to shoot all the people all the time, your empire isn't going to work. What makes it work is fear. And I kind of wonder if maybe that there's the idea of like the next couple of years are going to be so based around like making everyone so afraid of the clones, so afraid of the stormtroopers. And now, by the way, we're not going to you're not going to see that it's not clones anymore because everyone's still in those helmets. And like 10 years later, it's like, okay, now everyone is so afraid of the stormtroopers aren't going to have to shoot at them. So maybe if we cut costs by, giving them 2 weeks of rifle training instead of 6 months. This is a deep cut. A lot of
No, I really like that headcanon. I'll totally buy into that. That makes the most sense out of any explanation I've heard so far. That's good stuff.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun thing to see play out. And this is going to give you two a chance to talk about the animation for a second. I'm normally not the animation guy. It really made me wonder if they did some live action in animation when I saw that flamethrower that one of the guys had. Like, it just looked... I've never seen flames on an animated screen look that real before. How for you guys, what was the animation like, and is there anything you picked up from that?
Well, for me, I did mention in the previous episode that I noted some of those criticisms that were levied before in terms of like the stiltedness and whatnot. I have to check my own like biases, and I have to go back and watch that episode because I felt like that was entirely gone in this episode. And I wonder if it's a budget thing or if it's just, the lower lighting just makes the animation work that much better. But even just in terms of the detail of the characters' faces, like anytime you had dialogue, I just noticed so much more, just even in like the cheekbones and whatnot. You get like these almost like painterly brush strokes that really make them feel like living sculptures. And I was just completely enraptured. There was not a single visual or animated part that took me out for a second. I was enthralled and very pleased with everything as far as that goes this episode. In terms of the flamethrower, I would just give 100% credit to the animators. They've come a long way. Even I mentioned in the first episode, anytime we get those exterior shots of like a shuttle flying through space, you could tell me that's from a live action movie, and I wouldn't argue with you for a second. So
yeah,
even just seeing how far technology has come in terms of 3D animation as well. Like, having so recently watched the Clone Wars TV show, like, well, it started in, what was it, like 2008, 2009 was
Sounds
the
right.
first season?
Yeah.
And that's like, it's very puffy, lots of reuse of the same models and meshes over and over and over again. Whereas now, it is so much more fluid, and it feels a lot more integrated and realistic, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's interesting, and Jay Scotty, I'm going to have you on the Ethics podcast at some point to talk about Invincible.
Sure.
I've just been binge watching that the last week. Very good show, and also I'm enjoying their coverage of it on Animation Liberation. Definitely check it out. You guys are pointing out all sorts of things that I hadn't seen about it before.
Yeah.
But I bring it up because, to my eye at least, the animation of that is, I think, intentional, very, very much like this is an animated TV show. I would never, it doesn't look realistic in a way. And I don't think it's bad, but to me, that's what I think of when I think of animation. And it's, for my non-animated brain, it's like, okay, I love the story. I wish this was live action. It being animated doesn't do anything for me, but whatever. This, to me, feels fundamentally different. Like, this really feels like animation coming as close as it can to reality. And I don't know if that's like, because Invincible didn't have a budget, or if it's a very different artistic style, or... Scotty, what's your kind of take on that? Is it just different styles or budgets, or?
It's a combination of all those things. I mean, inherently they are very different styles, and anytime you're approaching animation from like a 3D perspective versus a 2D, I mean, going from camera placement alone, like you're working in almost an entirely different medium there. But in terms of Invincible, I do think, and a lot of times there you'll notice through the episode, no spoilers here or anything like that, but they really did save their budget for the big bombastic action moments and really using all the pencil lines and all the pencil mileage for the facial animations there. And you'll notice in some of the middle episodes and whatnot, some of the backgrounds are a little more lower quality renders and whatnot. But they're just, it's kind of like tackling two different beasts, but they're both super effective in what they're trying to do. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity here. Just allow me to plug. If you are listening here live, or as soon as this episode comes out, and you watched Invincible and you enjoy Invincible, please send us some feedback to Animation Deliberation. We're going to be doing a full season coverage and feedback episode, as well as some speculation for season 2, which was announced. You can send that to animationdeliberation podcast@gmail.com, please.
Definitely. And when is that episode? When are you recording that?
We'll be recording that on Tuesday.
Okay, so cool. Yeah, if you've not seen Invincible, make sure you have a strong stomach. There's a lot of gore animated, but for me at least, it was hard to watch. But Yeah, really interesting story. There's a lot to take on, and I've I stayed up a lot later than I should have 2 nights ago to get more of your podcast in, and I'm really excited to talk
thanks,
to you
man.
guys about it.
Thanks.
Sarah, what about you? Any kind of comments on the animation? I know you're kind of you are very much an artist yourself. Going back to school for it very soon.
Yeah. Well, I guess, so speaking of like Invincible, I know Invincible is based on a graphic novel, and I think the animation style is very like reminiscent and calling back to that, sticking especially with the 2D and just like the color choice, the use of line. Whereas like Clone Wars 3D, so, okay, before Clone Wars 3D was Clone Wars 2D, which was a very, very stylized show. And I have so much to say about that. I think we're doing a podcast about it, so I'll save my comments for there. But going from that like hyper stylized, and I think it's very like polarizing as well. It's the same guy who did Samurai Jack and Dexter's Lab.
Genndy Tartakovsky.
Yep, I could not pronounce that name. Thank you. And so going from that to Clone Wars 3D, which is definitely, I think, supposed to look more live action and maybe even be like a substitution for live action, but animation is just easier because then we don't have to buy all these costumes for folks and like have to worry about these practical effects of lightsabers and flying through space and all that sort of stuff. And now to get to here where the animation seems to be more taken on as an art form. Not to say that it wasn't before, but it seems less like we're using it as, like, I guess, going back to early Disney movies where a lot of the criticism was like, why aren't you just using live actors for this? Right? Where it's like, you're not showing something fanciful that requires animation. It's just like some chick who's asleep and then gets kissed by a dude. Why isn't this? Like, why aren't you just using people? So like, I guess I've kind of lost the plot here, but like, I don't know. I like that evolution of like animation just being a sort of means to an end in the beginning, whereas now we're definitely, like, you're talking about the brushstrokes on the faces of the characters, right? We're definitely getting into like the high art aspect of it.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I think that we might even do like a full episode at some point just on the animation in this show. And it'll mostly just be me asking you questions and shutting the hell up because you all see things I don't see. But, so I think that's kind of the main things I wanted to talk about for this episode. I think, honestly, the thing I'm most looking forward to now is seeing where Crosshair is going to go, especially because we got that, it does seem like he's very much in that good soldiers follow orders place. But he definitely had that kind of moment of like, walking into the barracks that he used to share with his brothers, the clones. Now he's with these new people, and he looked kind of pensive, and he looked to the marks on the walls. So I feel like that's for me the thing I'm kind of excited about. I also just love seeing Uncle Wrecker being best uncle.
Yes.
That was really great. Was that his stuffy? Like, he'd had like a little stuffed animal that he loved, and that was his that he like put in her room that she cuddled with, right?
It looked like it, yeah.
I didn't catch that, but that's extra adorable.
So what about for you all? Any kind of like wrap-up comments or things to bring up or mention?
Well, the one thing that got mentioned in the episode that I don't think we discussed is we did bring up the degradation of Jango Fett's original clone material, but the response to that was that the clones that they would require to enact this contingency plan, those clones would not be willing to return, but they only needed one. And my mind immediately went to Omega. I'm just curious to see what your guys' thoughts are there and where you think that's going. Because they already have Crosshair. What makes any of the other ones so different? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even think it was anyone in the Bad Batch because they were looking over the mess hall of like other clones. So I was just like, no, they're just gonna grab someone from down there. But yeah, you're probably right. It's almost definitely Omega because especially like she seems to have been like designed specially and maybe not necessarily from like Jango Fett's DNA, from like something different. Yeah.
I only watched it once, so I may have missed this, but my impression certainly was that I think they said something about how, like, the experiments we've been doing. There was something about, like, that they're already starting to examine this idea of making better clones.
Yes.
And I think that's why, Sarah, I would agree with you. That's what I especially took to mean that they're talking about Omega, or Amiga. That she is that she is much younger because, like, she was started many years later, as their attempt to sort of be like, what if we make female clones? What if we make clones with a couple of these different enhanced abilities? we haven't even mentioned it yet, but for someone with their first shot ever to shoot a rifle out of someone's hands, to me, that's an incredible act of marksmanship that I think is that, and plus some of the other stuff, like her intelligence. I definitely get the sense that she's supposed to also be an enhanced clone, so I think we may be going there, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like she's almost a mix of, if not all of them, then a few of them, because even when she was following Hunter and doing the tracking, right? Like I mentioned earlier, she saw dirt yesterday, and is now, like, following the dirt into this, the moon dragon's hole. And, like, she did see that it went in there, so, like, it's a pretty good hint. But she was, like, touching the dirt and sort of mimicking Hunter's actions there. So yeah, she might have a little bit of all of these enhancements purposely put in instead of them being like accidental mutations.
I think it's certainly possible.
Yeah, agreed.
Sarah, from you, any other kind of last things you wanted to mention?
I guess I had a couple of head scratch moments, which were so we talked about the bad parenting already, but when Omega was talking about like Crosshair's not being there, and they were all kind of sad. This was like immediately after talking about how she didn't have a bed. Like, why isn't she just sleeping in Crosshair's bed, I guess is my question. And we did get like the nice moment of Wrecker making the little like cave for her, which was super cute. But yeah, like do the clones not have beds like in their ship? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And also I really liked the roller coaster strap-in and how Wrecker like didn't quite fit in it. I thought that was another cute little moment.
Yeah, good call.
I took that because I had the same thought, and I think what I thought of it was that like they're not quite willing to accept that Crosshair is gone, and so it is Crosshair's bed, and having someone else use it wouldn't feel right. But also the like, okay, 10-year-old girl, you have to sleep on the floor because of our sentimentality. Like, I wish there had been a moment, I wish they had, like, if that was where they're going, they had named that, and someone had been like, come on, it can still be his bed, but she needs a bed to sleep on.
Or, like, Wrecker sleeps on the floor, and she sleeps in Wrecker's bed? Yeah, like, that just didn't make a ton of sense. But we did get, like, a nice little moment out of it, so.
Well, especially him building her own room, because, as we've seen, they've never had their own room. They've always just been, like, a bunch of them bunking together.
Mm-hmm.
The only other little thing that I noted, and it was very small, but I think they're starting to develop a little bit of tension between Tech and Echo.
Mm-hmm.
Because Echo, I think, is also, he's kind of like Lobot. He's kind of a walking computer in some ways. And I think we're establishing that, like, they have very different kinds of intelligence, but they're both hyper-intelligent and hyper-tech. And they're having a little bit of, like, how do we fit together? And so it was just barely mentioned, but I'm curious to see where that's going to go.
Yeah, that whole sequence where they were under, the undercarriage of the ship and messing with the capacitor, and you had the moon dragon lurking around. That I got very Empire Strikes Back vibes. When they land on that asteroid and they have the Minox, terrorizing the Millennium Falcon. And I just love anytime you can get those little, like George Lucas said, it's poetry, and even though it's not completely rhyming, you get the little.
Callbacks.
Yeah, callbacks and the shades there. Yeah, I love stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I also liked the scenes before that where like Tech and Echo are talking about like what's important and what's not. Right? Like Echo's complaining that stuff on the ship hasn't been fixed because he needs help, very pointedly asking Tech to help him, and then Tech just being like, we have life support. That's all we need. We're good. Don't worry about it. I'm going to look at this chip thing. And it's just like, we got to get on the same page, my dude.
Yeah, so I think obviously there's so much still we're going to see. Thank you both so much for being a part of this. From all time zones, it's hard, but especially Jay Scotty. It is rather early in the morning. I really appreciate you being a part of this here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
To our fans and listeners, would love to hear your feedback. Certainly next week, if you want to hop on with us at 9 a.m. Central, if you don't have one of those odd job things or a reason to, or I have a job. Many of us have jobs. If you're able to be active on Twitch at 9 a.m. Central on Fridays, you're very welcome. Give us feedback and questions live. Or if you want to send them in by email. We had a great one last time that we read on the episode. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter at The Ethical Panda. That's kind of the name that all of my podcasts go under. By searching for The Ethical Panda. You can also email us at theethicalpanda@gmail.com. Or just go to theethicalpanda.com, and there you'll find my podcasts about the Star Wars universe, as well as the Ethics podcast that Jay Scotty with his partner Zuhair Ali is doing great coverage of the animation liberation. We're going to have them on to discuss the ethics of that, as well as all those other podcasts. And then everything else that we do is all can be found on all these podcasts, as well as Jay Scotty's podcast, as well as other great podcasts about the MCU, Star Trek, so many other great things can all be found at strandedpanda.com. So definitely check that out. Sarah, for folks who want to kind of like follow any other stuff you're doing and things like that, where can they find you?
Oh my goodness. You can check out my Instagram, I guess. It's Sarah Hayashi Art. I have Twitter, but I think the last time I tweeted was like to complain about a customer service interaction like a year and a half ago. So that's maybe not the best place to follow me.
Sounds good. And Jay Scotty, we gave you somewhat of a plug already, but just to round it out, what else you want to let people know about Animation Liberation and kind of what they can expect checking it out and how they can give you feedback?
Yeah, just anywhere you find your podcast, Animation Deliberation. We are doing a contest for 5-star giveaways. If you participate in that on Apple Podcast, we will enter you for a drawing for a Stranded Panda Network t-shirt. Other than that, the Stranded Panda chat is a great way to reach out to us to there. And as far as stuff that's coming up, we're definitely excited to continue this partnership for Bad Batch, but we are definitely looking on the horizon. We've got MODOK just around the corner on May 21st, so we're super excited to get some new Marvel content, and that looks like it's going to be a ton of fun, and we're going to really look forward to getting into that. So, again, thanks for the opportunity to be here. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you to all the fans for tuning in, and have a great day.